Recap: Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Dao, Chapter 857, Chapter. In those tense days when destiny began to stir like thunder beneath the mountains, Ling Han acted without hesitation. With a single thought, he opened the mysterious depths of the Black Tower and gathered nearly everyone inside its boundless space. Only two remained beside him in the outside world, Feng Po Yun and Helian Tianyun. Then the three of them set off. Ling Han moved like wind tearing across a storm-swept plain, his figure streaking forward with the swiftness of lightning. This was the terrifying speed of a shattering void tier cultivator, the fastest pace the mortal world could offer. Helian Tianyun, however, had already crossed that threshold half a month before Ling Han. Within the Black Tower, spirit medicine flowed almost without restriction. There were no cultivation bottlenecks for him to worry about. As long as the elixirs were consumed, his power could grow steadily and rapidly. Because of that advantage, Helian Tianyun's advancement had been astonishingly swift. Ling Han sped forward through the skies, yet even while traveling, his mind quietly examined his own strength. At present, I have only stepped into the first layer of the shattering void tier, he thought calmly, measuring the currents of power circulating through his body. Yet my natural battle prowess can already rival 10 stars. A faint smile flickered across his lips as he continued his internal calculation. And if I combine that with the power of the nation's blessing, my strength can climb to 18 stars. But even as the thought formed, Ling Han shook his head slightly. However, the power of the nation does not stack so simply. If things truly worked like pure addition, then his extreme combat capability should have reached 19 stars, perhaps even 20. Yet reality was not so simple. The higher a cultivator climbed in the martial path, the smaller the gains that outside forces could grant. That was the natural law of cultivation. Ling Han recalled his earlier days in the heaven tier. At that time, the power granted by the nation had felt overwhelmingly immense compared to his own strength. His personal battle prowess had been insignificant beside it. But now things were different. In the shattering void tier, the gap between every single star was like the distance between two separate worlds. Thinking about it carefully, Ling Han concluded that if his personal strength one day truly reached 20 stars of battle prowess, then the current blessing of the nation might only raise him by 2 additional stars at most. Yet even that was terrifying. Because once battle prowess exceeded the natural limits of a tier, every single additional star represented a fundamental transformation. Even a single star beyond the limit could change the outcome of battles that shook heaven and earth. 3 days passed like drifting clouds. Eventually, the group entered the middle state, and not long afterward, they stepped into the territory of the Purple Moon Emperor's court. The moment they crossed that invisible boundary, both Ling Han and Feng Po Yun felt it instantly. The blessing of the nation vanished. The immense force that had once filled their bodies disappeared like a tide receding from shore. The sudden emptiness left behind felt strange, like losing something that had once supported every movement. Ling Han frowned slightly, adjusting to the unfamiliar sensation. Then realization dawned in his eyes. The power of the nation truly is a wonderful aid, he said thoughtfully. But it can only ever remain support. If one becomes dependent on it, that dependency itself will become a weakness. Feng Po Yun listened and nodded solemnly. For martial artists, the ultimate pursuit was always their own strength. If one relied too heavily on the blessing of a nation, then what would happen when they stepped beyond that nation's borders? What if they wished to explore ancient ruins? Or search for lost secrets hidden across the world? If their power existed only within the territory of a single empire, then such dreams would be impossible. Soon the three arrived outside the imperial city. There they stopped. Ling Han opened the Black Tower once again, allowing everyone to emerge. Afterward, they followed proper diplomatic etiquette, presenting their credentials and requesting formal entry. Ma Duo Bao responded quickly. He dispatched the Heavenly Astral King to welcome the delegation of the Great Ling Empire into the Imperial Palace. The Heavenly Astral King looked at Ling Han with clear admiration. "Congratulations to the Great Ling King," he said with a respectful smile. "You have finally stepped into the shattering void tier." His tone carried genuine amazement. After all, the first time he had seen Ling Han, the young man's strength had been so insignificant that it barely deserved attention. Yet now, in what seemed like the blink of an eye, Ling Han had reached the very same tier as him. Of course, the heavenly astral king still held deep confidence in himself. In his heart, he believed that if Ling Han truly wished to rival him, it would still require at least 100 years of polishing his cultivation. Ling Han chuckled softly. "It has been half a year since we last met," he replied politely. Yet the heavenly astral king remains as refined and dignified as ever. They exchanged a few courteous words. Then the group entered the imperial palace together. The grand event, the splitting open of the skies, had been scheduled for 3 days later. As the day approached, noble families from across the Middle State began arriving in endless waves. To be granted the qualification to enter the imperial palace was already a symbol of immense honor. The Purple Moon Emperor's court had become unimaginably powerful. In the battle at Heaven's Sword Sect, the 5 great sects had suffered a crushing defeat. Their collapse had elevated Ma Duobao's prestige to unprecedented heights. People now spoke his name with awe. The man who commanded the world's first killing formation, the warrior whose battle prowess had reached the terrifying level of 20 stars in the Shattering Void tier, he was widely acknowledged as invincible. Naturally, such fame stirred certain ambitions. When rumors spread that Ma Duobao had no empress, many young noble women began to feel restless. After all, if one could marry the most powerful man in the world, that single step could elevate them to the heavens. But during these final days before the ceremony, Ma Duobao refused all visitors. He secluded himself completely. He was making his final preparations. His mind had to be perfectly clear. His spirit had to be completely focused. Only by adjusting his state to absolute perfection could he face the unprecedented act that awaited him. Ling Han fully understood this decision. If he were in Ma Duobao's place, he would have done exactly the same. After all, splitting open the skies was an undertaking that had never been attempted before. At least, no one in the world believed it had. Only Ling Han knew the truth. Long ago, the vast lands had already experienced the skies being split open once. But that secret was too unbelievable. Even the mighty experts of the divine realm had been unable to achieve such a feat. So how could anyone imagine that it had once occurred in the lower realm? Ling Han and his companions were arranged in an elegant side manner within the palace grounds. After exchanging a few final words, the heavenly astral king took his leave. There were simply too many guests to manage. The 7 kings were all extremely busy. Yet despite that, several of them still found time to visit Ling Han personally. The Flame King came. The Great Water King came. One after another, the kings arrived to greet him and reminisce about past battles. After all, they had once fought together. And more importantly, Ling Han had earned Ma Duobao's personal recognition. 3 days passed swiftly. Then, the invitations were issued. All honored guests were escorted toward the skysplitting platform. The structure resembled a grand colosseum. Stone seats rose in massive tiers around the perimeter, while the center remained an enormous open space. And at the heart of that empty ground stood a weapon that radiated chilling authority. A colossal axe. Its blade gleamed with an ancient and terrifying brilliance. This was the Mountain River Axe. Soon, Ma Duobao would lift this divine weapon and attempt to split open the skies themselves. The gathered guests would sit and witness history unfold. Ling Han and 50 others were escorted by imperial guards toward the highest level of the platform. This was the most prestigious position available. It had been personally reserved by Ma Duobao. No one was permitted to stand beside him. Only Ling Han was granted that honor. Meanwhile, the 7 kings patrolled the surrounding area of the platform. Today was the greatest day in the history of the Purple Moon Emperor's court. Security had to be absolute. The 5 great sects might attempt retaliation. The 1,000 Corpse sect could attempt sabotage. Even the Sea race might interfere. Every possible threat had to be guarded against. Because the seating arrangements were packed tightly, the aisles between rows were extremely narrow. Under such circumstances, flying through the air was forbidden. To do so would be a grave insult to the ceremony. Thus, everyone had to walk through the cramped passages. And naturally, when two large groups met face to face, neither side could easily pass. If only two individuals encountered each other, stepping aside would be trivial. But when groups of more than 10 people collided, the situation became awkward. More importantly, martial artists valued their pride. Who wanted to be the first to step aside? As Ling Han and his group advanced through one of the aisles, they suddenly found themselves blocked by another group. Around 20 young people stood before them. Each of them radiated arrogance. Their expressions were swollen with pride. And the reason for that pride was simple. They were members of the Liu family. The Liu family had recently entered a golden era. 4 years ago, their ancestor had broken through to the shattering void tier. He had become one of the strongest figures in the entire world. In the eyes of the Liu family's younger generation, that meant only one thing. Their ancestor was the #1 expert beneath heaven. With such backing, who in the world would dare challenge them? Simply attending this ceremony was already them giving the Purple Moon Emperor's court face. And yet now, someone dared block their path. "Hey," one of the youths shouted angrily, "move aside! Who the hell do you people think you are, daring to walk in our path?" Another sneered coldly, "Hurry up and kneel down. Just looking at you is irritating." Several youths began shouting loudly, their faces filled with disdain. Even when their ancestor had still been in the heaven tier, these juniors had already behaved arrogantly. Now that he had ascended to the shattering void tier, their arrogance had become completely unrestrained. At once, Ken Yi and the others drew their weapons. "Impudence," they roared. To insult their liege was to court death, but Ling Han simply raised a hand gently. A faint smile appeared on his face. "Today is Brother Ma's day of great celebration," he said calmly. "There is no need to use force." "Yes," his followers replied immediately, lowering their weapons. The Liu family youths burst into loud laughter. "Now that's more like it," one of them mocked. Seeing Ling Han step aside, they lost interest in continuing the conflict. Instead of forcing Ling Han's group to kneel, they simply strutted forward arrogantly and took their seats. As they walked away, they continued discussing the matter with great enthusiasm. "Our ancestor truly is incredible," one youth said proudly. "We didn't even need to say our surname, and those people immediately backed off." Meanwhile, the Liu family ancestor and several senior members were already seated nearby, but the younger generation could never sit still. They wandered around, chatting with anyone they pleased, especially when they spotted beautiful women. Soon the story reached the ears of the elders. "What happened just now?" the ancestor asked casually. The youngsters happily recounted the incident. They described Ling Han's group as insignificant nobodies. While they spoke, the ancestor casually turned his head to glance toward the group they had mentioned. Then his expression froze. His face twitched violently. In the next instant, his expression darkened. He raised a trembling finger and pointed toward Ling Han's group. "The people you were talking about," he said slowly. "Was it them?" "Yes, ancestor," the youths answered proudly. "It was them." The old man's face turned pale, his breathing nearly stopped. Then suddenly, This old man will beat you to death." Before the shocked youngsters could react, their ancestor exploded with fury and began striking them violently across the face. The gathering that day had drawn countless eyes, but among those present, there were every few who truly understood the storm that had just brushed past the Liu family. Most people present did not recognize Feng Po-yun at first glance, but the ancestor of the Liu family, an old fox who had lived long enough to witness countless tides of history, recognized him the moment his eyes landed upon that lone wordsman. How could he not? Feng Po-yun was an ordinary cultivator wandering the world. He was a legendary loose cultivator who had stepped into the shattering void tier through sheer will and swordsmanship, a rare existence whose name echoed across continents like the ringing of a celestial blade. Tales about him had been circulating for centuries. Stories of a man who cultivated the fabled sword heart, whose sword intent was said to slice through mountains and silent storms. Among cultivators of the same tier, Feng Po-yun was known as an undefeated legend. The Liu family ancestor had only recently broken into the shattering void tier himself. In the eyes of ordinary people, that already placed him at the peak of the world, but he understood the truth far better than they did. Even if he advanced further, even if he reached the 5th layer of the shattering void tier, He still would not be Feng Po-yun's match. But that wasn't even the most terrifying part. The Liu family ancestor counted silently in his mind as he looked toward Ling Han and the others. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 living cultivators at the shattering void tier, and 1 towering stone puppet that radiated a terrifying presence. 4 shattering void tier existences. The old ancestor's scalp tingled. Had these idiots from his family eaten the gallbladder of a dragon? To provoke such a group? Wasn't that simply inviting the annihilation of the entire Liu family? Without another word, the ancestor stepped forward. Pa! The sound of palms striking flesh echoed through the air. The youngsters of the Liu family were struck repeatedly before they even had time to react. Slaps rained down mercilessly, leaving them spinning in place, their heads ringing and their faces swelling before their eyes. The blows were not gentle. In the span of a few moments, each of them was left bruised and battered, completely bewildered about what had just happened. Only when the ancestor finally lowered his hand did the beating stop. The old man snorted coldly and said, "None of you are allowed to heal those injuries." He pointed toward Ling Han's direction. "Follow this old man and apologize." What? The Liu family youths stared in disbelief. Only now did they realize that the beating had something to do with those outsiders earlier. But that realization only made things more confusing. Normally, these same youngsters strutted around the city like tyrants. They bullied people whenever they pleased, acting domineering countless times before. Yet the Liu family had never scolded them for it, not even a word of reproach. But now, not only had they been beaten half to death, they were being ordered to apologize. Their minds were spinning. Who exactly were those people? If they were truly powerful, then why had they backed off earlier? Wasn't that clearly because they feared the Liu family? One of the youths finally gathered enough courage to speak. Ancestor? Why? He was the most favored descendant in the Liu family. Only someone like him would dare open his mouth at such a time. The other youngsters held their breath. They all wanted the answer. Otherwise, the humiliation they had just suffered would feel unbearable. The old ancestor snorted coldly. "You all think that because this old man has broken through to the shattering void tier, I am invincible beneath the heavens?" His gaze swept across them sharply. "Among the people you bullied earlier, there were 4 shattering void tier elites." He paused for emphasis before continuing. "And at least one of them only needs a single move to defeat this old man." The youths nearly choked on their own breath. Impossible! In their eyes, their ancestor was practically a godlike existence. Even if he might not be the strongest in the world, he should at least stand undefeated among ordinary cultivators. The shattering void tier was already the peak of this realm. Who could possibly threaten such an existence? But the old ancestor only sighed inwardly. If he had no family, no responsibilities, no descendants to protect, then perhaps he truly would not fear anyone. After all, for shattering void tier elites, fleeing from danger was never difficult. But Feng Po-yun was a lone wanderer. The Liu family ancestor, on the other hand, carried an entire clan on his back. That difference alone was enough to force him to bow his head. So he waited. He did not move immediately. Instead, he stood quietly until Ling Han and the others finished taking their seats. Only then would he bring his juniors forward to apologize. Meanwhile, the rest of the Liu family watched from afar. Soon, their eyes widened in shock. Because Ling Han and his companions had taken seats at the very highest position of the sky-splitting platform, from that vantage point, the entire ceremonial grounds could be seen clearly. The sight left everyone stunned. This was no ordinary seating arrangement. The seats on the platform were carefully assigned according to status and recognition. Each location represented how the Purple Moon Emperor's court viewed a particular force. And in the entire world, who would dare question the judgment of the Purple Moon Emperor's court? Would anyone dare protest against an elite with 20 stars of shattering void tier battle prowess? Beneath Ling Han's seats, an entire large area had been left empty. It was a silent declaration from the Purple Moon Emperor's court. No faction was allowed to sit on equal footing with the Great Ling Empire. Not merely one level below, but several levels beneath, the Liu family youths stared at the arrangement with disbelief. Even the Liu family ancestor felt a trace of displeasure rise within his heart. He admitted that he was no match for Feng Po-yun. But still, both of them were shattering void tier cultivators. The difference between them should not be that great. Yet now, the seeding made it seem as thought they were separated by several tiers of status. Wasn't that going a bit too far? And he was not the only one who noticed. Although the middle state possessed very few shattering void tier elites, aside from the 5 great sects, only forces like the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, the Alchemist Society, and the Cold Spear Association held cultivators at that level. Those elites still existed. Now they found themselves sitting far below Ling Han. They had to look up toward him as if they were subjects gazing at their ruler. Naturally, that left many people feeling uncomfortable. The Liu family ancestor suddenly changed his mind. He chuckled inwardly. A tall tree attracts the wind. With so many powerful figures present, perhaps it would be better to wait and observe. If those youngsters were beaten down by the others, then they would have no face left to trouble the Liu family afterward. Sure enough, the shattering void tier elites from various factions soon began to grow dissatisfied. Why should you people sit above everyone else? Yes, Feng Po-yun was strong, but not to the point of towering over every other shattering void tier elite. At that moment, a figure stepped forward toward the high platform. The man sneered coldly. Heh heh. His voice echoed with disdain. Beneath certain seats lies a volcano. He glanced toward Ling Han and the others. Not everyone has the qualifications to sit there. If the volcano erupts, those who sit above it may be burned to ashes. The speaker was a veteran cultivator whose name had been known across the land for over 500 or 600 years. His name was Man Jingyi. His cultivation had reached the 8th layer of the shattering void tier. However, time had not been kind to him. His chi and blood had already begun to decline, and his true battle prowess was no longer equal to 8 stars. Even so, in terms of seniority and reputation, he was undoubtedly a towering figure, and thus he became the first to openly challenge the arrangement. After all, he possessed great prestige and a glorious reputation, yet he had to sit below these youngsters. Did they truly have the qualifications for that? Man Jingyi was already over 1,000 years old. His lifespan was nearing its end. Less than 10 years remained. Because of that, he had grown fearless. Whether his opponent was powerful or not, he no longer hesitated to take a stance of mutual destruction. The older he became, the more he cared about honor. After all, there was an old saying, a man lives by his reputation, just as a tree stands because of its bark. Ling Han simply chuckled. No problem, he said calmly. I can handle it. Man Jingyi raised his snowy white eyebrows. You're sure? Around them, the crowd stirred. Haha, Elder Man is about to get serious. Even though his chi and blood have declined, his cultivation still stands at the 8th layer of the shattering void tier. Across the entire world, the number of people with higher cultivation than him can be counted on one's fingers. And if Elder Man burns his chi and blood to fight at his limit, he can still unleash 8 stars of battle prowess. That's already among the strongest battle prowess in this world. The surrounding cultivators nodded. It was incredibly difficult to fight beyond one's tier once someone had reached the shattering void tier. That was why people said that even a difference of 1 star was the gap between worlds. Even geniuses such as the legendary Sword King could only challenge opponents 3 or 4 stars above themselves. Was the world filled with monsters like that? Of course not. Ling Han smiled calmly. Of course, he said. Man Jingyi lifted his hand slowly. Then how about you take one move from this old man? Ling Han nodded without hesitation. Sure. Please go ahead. High above the sky, 7 figures observed the scene quietly. They were the 7 kings. Justice Mountain King spoke first. Should we step in and help? Heavenly Astral King shook his head. Since His Majesty personally acknowledged him, even if his strength is not equal to ours, he should not be someone who would lose to such trash. He glanced toward Ling Han thoughtfully. Besides, his physique is the same as His Majesty's. He gave a faint smile. So what if that old trash attacks him? Touch, the other 6 kings agreed. They all nodded and abandoned the idea of interfering. Meanwhile, Man Jingyi was somewhat surprised. This youngster truly did not know fear. Just because he had stepped into the shattering void tier, he believed himself invincible? Very well. Today he would teach this young man a lesson. The older the ginger, the spicier it becomes. Manjingi's figure shot upward into the sky. His robes fluttered as he rose above the platform. Then let us fight. No matter how arrogant he might be, he would not dare damage the sky-splitting platform. Not to mention Ma Duobao himself. Any one of the 7 kings present could easily deal with him, and Manjingi valued his reputation greatly. Naturally, he had no intention of being defeated in front of everyone on the ground, so the battlefield shifted into the open sky, where 2 shattering void tier cultivators would soon clash beneath the watching eyes of the entire world.